Welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Goldskythe. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion / Lord of the Rings fic by Bloodwing Blackbird from Archive of Our Own called And Now Each Night I Count the Stars. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. Note, this fic is rated explicit. On with the show. And now each night I count the stars. Chapter 25. Halbarrad's father was still alive, frail and forgetful. He stood silently in a corner of the house where he and Halbarrad had lived after his mother's death. Halbarrad hadn't been there in a decade. It had burned, and all the rest of their little settlement with it. Not long after Halbarrad had finally died. Halbarrad knew that he would find him when he walked in. The sudden memory that he had forgotten something important, the guilt of having left something behind rising up in his chest. How could he have left his father here? Halbarrad turned to embrace him, his lined face stretching into a vacant smile, cheeks slack and soft, smelling of age and sickness, his green eyes faded and watery. "You came to see me?" he asked, and Halbarrad stepped away from his grasp. "I thought you died." "I was waiting for you," said Maklar, and he shook where he stood, and the scent of blood filled Halbarrad's nose as it soaked through his father's clothes. "I'm sorry." "Who are you again?" Maklar said, and he smiled wide and broken, his eyes pale as a corpse. Halbarrad choked on nothing and jittered awake. The Chetwood was not quiet at night, not during summer. There were low spots in the woods where water collected, and these true insects and frogs which sang all night. It was a comforting sort of sound, and Halbarrad let it fill his ears, hoping it would drown out the shouting in his head. "You all right, Hal?" "Go to sleep, Aklaril." "That's what I was trying to do," she muttered, hunching herself into her cloak and rolling over with a huff. The peak of summer was past, and the grass had grown dry and sharp in the fields. Halbarrad and Aklaril had been camping in the Chetwood and the lands nearby for nigh on a month, but it would soon be time to move on, back down to the villages, maybe, to gather supplies, then south to patrol the lands south of Sarden Ford. They ate their evening meal atop a rise from which they could see beyond the forest edge, prepared to keep watch on the fields nearby. Halbarrad had perched on a boulder covered with crumbling lichens, and there he watched as a flock of starlings dancing upon the breeze like a scrap of silk borne aloft. The last of the late daylight had fled, and fields that were hot and golden by day had shaded to cool tones of evening. When he first saw the dark figure in the field below, he took it for a deer in the confusing light of dusk, until it stopped still and turned its face to sky, one hand lifted to hold his hat in place. The hairs on Halbarrad's forearms rose, and he dropped his pipe unlit upon the stone. Aklaril noticed and came to his side, arrow already on string. "What is it?" She narrowed her eyes at the figure making its way across the field. "Are we expecting a visitor?" That was, Halbarrad supposed, a more complicated question than it should have been. Expecting? Maybe he was, but in a hopeless sort of way. "Perhaps I am." He flapped his hand at her. "Put that away. It's probably a shepherd, or hunter from the village. Do you want to explain to Aragorn why you shot him?" Aklaril cast her eyes heavenward, but she put the arrow away. "It's no Freeland hunter! Halbarrad, look!" "At what? You've got younger eyes than I." She sighed and leaned down next to his ear to point. "Look at the spear! I think your stray has found his way back to you." She smacked him on the shoulder. "The offer to shoot him stands. I'll wait your signal, Captain," she said before removing herself a few paces into the trees. Halbarrad squinted, trying to resolve the shape into someone familiar and beloved, his blood throbbing in his ears with every uneven stalking step. The false leg he wore had changed his gait. How could it do otherwise? Oh, but it was him now. Again. Still. Macaulay moving. Out in the world. Not hidden in a dim room that smelled of stale flesh and illness. Halbara could almost see the sharp glistening tilt of his head, the graceful gestures of his hands as he reached out to touch the ripening grasses. When he was a stone's throw away, Halbara could no longer wait. "Ho, stranger!" he called out. "What does the son of Feanor seek in the north?" Below him, Maklo stopped and pushed his ridiculous hat back, his eyes flickering like sparks in the dust. "I think I have found it, son of Halbaran. Tell me, is there an easy route to your eyrie, or shall I have to fly?" His voice was a rasp, as rough as a raven scolding, but oh, it was good to hear it. Better still to hear the little twist in the words. "There's a path over yonder," he pointed, "in the lee of the hill. If you wish, I'll come down and guide you." "I'm not so lost at that. Not any more. I shall find a way, if you'll tell your guards not to slay me yet." He looked to the trees where Halbarded was almost certain Aklaril waited. "Yet?" "I've been learning to temper my expectations," he said, and Halbarded could see the right twist of his lips even in the dim light. Maklar turned his bright eyes and began to make his way to the path that Halbarded had indicated. Halbarded stayed put. Perhaps he too was learning the value of adjusting one's expectations, but if he took a few moments to run his hand through his hair and to press the heels of his hands to his eyes until he saw sparks, well, that was no one's business but his own. He thought himself admirably composed by the time he heard Aklaril speaking sharply behind him. He couldn't make out the words of Maklar's grumbled reply, but he could feel the change in the air behind him. A pack dropped to the ground with a musical jangling that cut through whatever attempt he was making at equanimity. He turned and caught his breath at the sight. The fading light had gentled some of Maklar's sharp edges, and Halbard could still see clear marks of captivity and illness on him, but it was his blackbird. Again, bright eyes, bitter, not quite smile. "May I sit?" "Of course. It's not my rock." Maklar sighed as he lowered himself to the rock beside Halbard. "Are you well?" Halbard asked. Maklar laughed. "I suppose that depends on your meaning. Do you mean to inquire about my health, or about my general state of being? Do you mean at this moment, or do you mean to encompass my existence more broadly?" He looked down over the field he had just crossed. "I'm sorry. That's no answer. I am weary, I suppose. Some of it will pass." "What does Elrond say?" "About my leaving? I did not consult with Elrond," he said, twisting his fingers together in his lap. When he saw Halbard watching, he crossed his arms across his chest, shoulders hunched. "I could not stay there." "Why not?" "Elrond would offer me healing and gentleness. I don't want either." "Why not?" Maklar looked at him as if he were a great fool. Halbard cleared his throat. "Well then, how are you feeling, both with regard to your health and to your general state, as broadly as you might wish to tell me?" "Ah, I see we begin with the simple questions. I suppose I am in adequate health, all things considered. I tire easily, and am often in pain. And if you must know what Elrond says, well, he counsels patience. Everyone says you know me well, so I'll leave you to imagine my feelings on the matter. That will do for the matters of the flesh. For the rest, it's not so easy." He looked across the field to where the trees were now just a smudge of darker gray at the far edge of the field. He cleared his throat, and one of his hands lifted to rub on his neck, absent-minded until he caught Halbard watching. "There are times when I feel awake, when I believe that I know where I am, and perhaps even who. There are others, well—" He coughed again and fumbled in his pockets, eventually taking a swallow from a little blue bottle. He didn't tell Halbard what the other times were like. "I remembered nothing new, but I find another thing I've forgotten near daily. My voice is as you hear it. I think that I'll never sing again." He looked away from Halbard. and whenever it is too quiet, I still hear him. He turned to Halbottom, looking at him at last. I'm not an easy person to be around. I fear I'm not a safe person to be around. Silence stretched between them for a long moment as Halbottom considered that. And yet here you are. Was this a chance meeting? No. But you do not remember me. I do not. Halbottom rubbed his eyes. What do you want from me, Maklar? He hunched his shoulders and ducked his head, chin tucked sideways. I want you to tell me who I was, who I became, with you. And then what? And then I want you to tell me who I am now. After that, I don't know. I won't promise anything. If you knew me, you would know that I wouldn't ask anything. I don't know you, but I think that I could trust you. Halbottom snorted. Let us begin there. I'm not certain that you trusted anyone. I'd hardly have told you. I know that much about myself. He rubbed his arms around his chest tight, hands clenched on his forearms, making himself small. Halbottom couldn't bear it. Stand up, Blackbird. Let me look at you, before the light is gone. Maklar stared, then unfolded himself and rose. What do you see? She asked, taking a moment to find his balance. This is new. Halbottom gestured at the false leg that he wore. The Smith woman of Archet made it for me. She said she owed me a kindness. See, you've found a piece of who you were already, Halbottom smiled. You'll hardly need me at all. Is it too dark for you? Not for what I need to see. Come now, indulge me. He stood to face Maklar, then paused at the words. Unless you truly do not wish to. You are tired. We can talk of this tomorrow. No, said Maklar softly. Please. Halbottom stepped closer and studied him. You say that you don't remember who you were, that you weren't sure who you are. I don't think that I can understand what that might be like. I have only ever had to be one person. But you, I think, have been many, even before I met you. I can't see them all, not whole, but I glimpsed parts of them. He looked down and found one of Maklar's hands, holding it between his own, looking at it as he had done in the hayloft in Bree on the night that felt very long ago. Would it be too much if I tell you that I would like to know them all? I think it might be, said Maklar, his voice tight, hand clenched to a fist in Halbottom's. Halbottom let it go. Then I shall say no such thing. You are changed, as am I, as are we all, with time. When you returned to me, I thought... Maklar moved to speak, but Halbottom went on. I suppose I thought that things would be as they once were. That was a mistake, and I am sorry. I too. They built a fire that night, him and Aglaril and Maklar, and sat around it. Maklar quiet as Halbottom and Aglaril planned. Halbottom did not mean to watch him, but he could not help it, watching the firelight light the sharp profile in bright red and gold, dancing in his eyes. Maklar must have grown bored with their talk, fairly enough, Halbottom thought, especially if he did not know any of the people they were speaking of. He had already pulled Halbottom aside to ask if he had met Aglaril before. They had been bickering about whether or not take the road through Bree, an old argument, every point and counterpoint the same, though they seemed to trade positions every time they travelled together. Maklar sat still enough that he might have been part of the woods, staring just above the fire to where sparks flickered out of their way to greet the stars. Halbottom quite lost the thread of the conversation, and Aglaril huffed at him. Well, how about a song from the Blackbird if my conversation is so uninteresting? She groused, affecting a pout and throwing another branch to the fire. Maklar stirred and blinked at her as if his mind had been far away indeed. Yes, very well. He sat up straighter. Hand me my lute. He had taken the false leg off and wrapped himself in one of Halbarda's cloaks despite the warmth of the night and the fire. Aklari grinned and scrambled to her feet. She had always been one for songs. Can't sing anymore, Maklor said as she handed him the lute. Could you before? She asked. Maklor looked at her, then at Halbarad, who didn't know what question he was meant to answer, so he pretended he hadn't noticed. Maklor shrugged. You could say that I was known for it, once. I can sing passably if I know the song. Not Hal, though. He couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. Ah, poor fellow, said Maklor. Can't sing, dances like a drunken bull. He stopped, eyes on Halbarad, a smile on his lips that slid away forgotten, as whatever memory had slipped its bond surfaced and disappeared again. After a moment he shook himself and began to tune the lute. What would you like to hear? The fire had burned low by the time he stopped playing. Halbarad and Aklaril spellbound beneath the stars. The last notes were washed away by the breeze, and the songs of the frogs and crickets returned. Aklaril stretched and yawned. Don't tell Halbarad, but he wasn't the only one that missed you, Blackbird. Aklar caught Halbarad's eye. Your secret's safe with me. Aklaril groaned. Well, if you two are going to be like that, I'm going to sleep on the other side of the creek. Halbarad laughed and stood. Good night, Aklaril. She waved and picked up her bedroll, dragging her feet as she went. Halbarad went and held a hand down to Maklor, who ignored it and used one of the walking sticks to rise. Halbarad sighed and lowered his hand. Well, I suppose that's good night then. You can keep the cloak. Wait. Halbarad turned back and was caught again, ensnared by the shine of his eyes, this time watching him, allied with something wild and almost forgotten. I don't remember you, said Maklor, but when I'm near you, I feel as if I'm home. Halbarad dared to step closer to him, his heart beating like the wings of a bird. Will you stay, then? I would like to try. Leaning on the crutches, he had to look up at Halbarad. He noticed at the same time that Halbarad did, and let them fall to the ground beside them, standing tall. I do not know what we were before, but perhaps we could become something new. When Halbarad couldn't speak, Maklor smiled, that old wry twist that said he wanted you to believe that whatever had come before was of little consequence to him. Halbarad had long since learned that it meant exactly the opposite. If you wish it, of course, Maklor finished, tucking Halbarad's cloak even tighter. Oh, you fool, was all Halbarad could think to say to that, and then he must have moved, because Maklor was in his arms again, and next time Halbarad remembered to ask, to warn, but Maklor stiffened in his arms, not readying to fly away this time, but only shifting so that he could hold him back all the tighter. I think I always want to be near you. Maklor drew back to look at him. I thought I was meant to be the fool. Fools together, then. End of chapter 25. Stay tuned.